Kathy? Oh, wait a minute.
Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, we need something that really captures everyone's attention.
Oh, your room's out.
Okay, so we've got
Oh, he's not.
Tony's here, but he says he has to go at 3, and
Oh.
Kathy will be up in a minute, and of course Brandy couldn't join us today, but she promised she'll be able to watch the recording. So we've got a full agenda and an hour and a half. We might not do the whole amount of time, but we're going to talk about City of Charlottesville's compensation policy work, talk about JMRL's compensation, talk about the operational budget requests that I shared with you all, which I also didn't bring a copy of. And
all right.
maybe we'll get to that point, and then a recommendation that we would make for the Budget Finance Committee and the full JMRL board. So as a reminder to everyone here, the Personnel Committee helps to shape JMRL's personnel policies, procedures, and in this case, we once a year around this time to review the requests that JMRL managers made for additional operational costs, and then make a recommendation, which then goes to the Budget Committee, which has to then say whether or not it's possible for these things get forwarded onto the jurisdiction.
Last time we sort of did it in order. What we thought
but I want to spend a good amount of time today talking about compensation. So just a little bit of history here, and Krista can jump in and help me. Most of you guys have been here long enough to remember most of these. So JMRL went through a salary study in the early aughts, and that was the last time we did a full-blown like a look at all of our positions, look at all of our job descriptions, and try to match bands and stages with that. We moved with the City of Charlottesville as they did that. They included us in that study. We instituted a new pay scale and assessments, annual assessment procedure that we're still using to this day, 20 years later. So it's been outdated on both ends, needs some work. The board has addressed the salary scale for JMRL twice in major fashions at that time. Once was a compression adjustment that finished up the very last year of that 3-year rollout was 2020. So there were some staff that had their pay rates adjusted. The goal there was that at 8 years in service to JMRL, you should be halfway through the pay scale. And that's what our employee handbook says as well. And then we just finishing up now the minimum wage adjustment, which only impacted the folks at the very bottom of the pay scale. It all went up to $15 as a minimum, and everybody under $17 got a subsequent bump over that. So those were very directed things. The board has also, in the last 20 years, moved the pay scale up by 1%. I think at least 3 times that's happened. The reason that happens is because our substitute positions are not eligible for raises. The only way that we increase pay for those positions is to move the pay scale. I realized when I started that while the pay scale had moved up a few times, the far end of it, the midpoint hadn't moved and the top end hadn't moved as well. So all those got adjusted, which meant that people who had been on track for halfway through were no longer on track for halfway through because the goalposts moved. So that's kind of where we have been. It has been effectively since 2009, 2% raises for our JMRL staff every year that they have gotten raises. The exceptions for getting raises were the COVID year where we readjusted the budget at the last minute. So that was, we did that in the spring of 2020, but it impacted the next fiscal year. And there was a no raise for staff, although the board did give a one-time pay adjustment that year. And the Great Recession. There was a year cost of living for staff. But generally it has been a 2% raise every year. Okay. So the city started work last year around this time on a new compensation policy. They hired Gallagher consultants and they began a salary study. They included JMRL's positions because we contract with them for HR. So they host our job descriptions and they provide HR support for us. And all of our staff filled out a PDQ, which I've already forgotten what it stands for. Yeah, it was something. It was basically tell us everything that you do in your job. Professional
Professional description
questionnaire.
Yes, questionnaire. Professional private disease. I can look that up.
I should
So
look it up.
every staff member filled one out. We got pretty high participation. It was a lengthy survey. I collated them all. The managers had a chance to look over them. They couldn't change something. So if Chris, for example, wrote, it's my job to drive the delivery truck every day. And his manager looked at it and said, well, that's not true. That's not one of your job duties. They could make a note, but they couldn't just remove it. So all the information. Go ahead.
Position description questionnaire.
Okay.
PDQ.
Thank you. So those kind of went out to the ether for a while. Gallagher worked on them, and then they spit out some information that they gave back to city council, but not to the library per se. So I'm here to share some of that information with you all today and start talking about what JMRL needs to do to try to improve our staff. So I'm going to show a few things here, if you don't mind. This is from a presentation that Gallagher gave to the city of Charlottesville when they wrapped up their 2022 classification and comp study. This is available on the city of Charlottesville's website, so anyone can go find it and look at it. I just wanted to, it's very city focused, so it's like 20 slides about the city of Charlottesville. I wanted to highlight the ones that impact us, and then we'll talk about where the library is. So starting with who did they compare to? So these are the there's Kathy. Chris, can you go?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
No, we're in here. Yeah.
Kathy, we just started, so you didn't miss too much.
I apologize.
No problem. Glad to see you.
I told everybody to hurry up.
It didn't work.
You're talking about we did a little bit of history of compensation for JMRL. We're talking about the compensation study the city is working. I apologize for the orientation here. We have to be close to the wall. So
That's fine.
if you can see, these are the tiers that Gallagher looked at for the city of Charlottesville. A bunch of cities and some counties there. For JMRL, it gets a little murky because some of the peers are Albemarle and Green, which are part of JMRL. So they don't have salary information for library positions, not our salary information. But it's a pretty wide berth there, largely more populous areas than some of JMRL. We're in a unique scenario because we serve a very populated Charlottesville and Albemarle. This is a very fast growing population, and Nelson and Louisa, Nelson and Green are not quite as big, so it's apples to oranges sometimes, and it's kind of try to split the baby, as they say. So here's who they looked at, and the overall city's comparison is at the bottom here, and they basically came out okay. At the 50th percentile, the city is highly competitive with the full market. So what they mean by that is for any given position, they were looking at the market 50th range mid, they call it, which means that they talk to all those other counties, and if the job was, librarian 1, they took the actual salaries, not the pay scale, the actual salaries of all the librarian 1s, and they figured out what's the median, what's the 50th percentile there, and they looked about where are you close to that. So that was kind of the goal for them. And the city of Charlottesville was highly competitive with the full market. They were under the actuals by about 2.3%. So their average salary for any given position was about 2.3% under the average salary for any position from the peers that they talked to. But remember these here. So if it's between plus or minus 5%, then it's highly competitive. It means that, if somebody's looking at a job in 2 of those areas there and every other consideration was equal, that they would be about the same for pay. If it's within 10%, it's competitive. If it's under 10 to 15% below where the peers are there, then it's a possible misalignment. If it's over 15% below where the midpoint is for the peers, it's definitely, Gallagher considers it definitely to be misaligned. Stop me with questions too, because this was stuff I had to learn in the last 6 months.
And this one, they were librarian salaries as well as all the others.
We're going to talk about how they That's a good question.
Because you were saying this is mostly about the other.
Yes. Okay, so then they kind of laid out all the jobs in the city. I'm sorry, that's very fuzzy too. Maybe we can make it bigger.
Yeah.
And they compared like an accountant to, here's the city's base salary. And that's not the starting salary, that's the average of all their accounts. They had 10 accounts, it's the average salary. The combined market base that they looked at was 57,241, so it was about 9.2% under. So it was under there, but based on what I said from the last one, within 10% there, they consider that to be, yeah, it's competitive. It's not great, but it's
Right.
okay. So they worked through all this and they made a recommendation. This is Gallagher, the consultants that the city hired, to propose a new pay structure where they would have a new minimum amount, a new midpoint, and a new maximum amount for like 29 pay grades. And the city took that information and brought it back and realized that 29 wasn't going to work for them. They had a lot more jobs than that. And things that Gallagher had classified as being together were really different things. They had to split apart. So it didn't, you know, apples to oranges again. So it gets even worse when we start talking about the liars. So the next one is the proposed new structure, and I'll just show you here that within each, you know, kind of branch or department, they come up with the classification titles. They have a new minimum annually, and then they have in this particular case, 2.1% increase between each step, and it goes up 52% from step 1 to step 20. This was the recommendation, basically, and what it does is it puts you on. So those of you who've worked in education before are familiar with that step, where every year, you know, as long as you're not breaking the rules and you're doing your job or whatnot, everybody gets the annual step to go along with their cost of living. And that's never something that the city has done, it's never something that JMRL has done, but it is what the consultants are recommending, and it is likely what the city is going to move to. They're working on it now, they're working on developing this for their own staff.
So this isn't cost of living, this is about
This is
rewarding
Yes.
people for their service, right? So if we could get librarians to stay for 20 years, this would be.
Yes, where you know ahead of time, you would be able to tell incoming new staff, here's where you would begin at this step. Here's where you should expect to be in 5 years, here's where you should be in 10 years, and it's all laid out there. And the only change the board would make is occasionally revisiting the steps themselves to see if they need to be changed. So it would provide a level of pay transparency that we currently don't. The information available to our staff is not nearly as good as this because we are only moving at every job at a percentage cost of living every year. That's not bringing people along the pay scale. It's not keeping up with inflation now, and it was barely keeping up before.
And the trend now is not to stay at a job.
This is true.
I just like my sister, and I think she's had 15 jobs, but each time, you know, she's in finance, and each time it's more money, but they don't stay anywhere.
Is she hiring?
Hmm?
Is she hiring? And the other thing is that we don't offer the pension plan that we offered in the early aughts. So for new staff coming on, some people are grandfathered in and have a pension plan.
After 27 years.
Yes.
But when I started, the pension plan was available.
Yeah.
But to Kathy's point, I mean, we have seen recently a lot of long-term JMRL employees retire after decades of the library system. And one of the reasons, not the only reason, do it out of love, but one of the reasons is because they were offered a pension plan to stay, a big incentive to stay, and we're not offering that. We are not offering that. We are offering a very generous 401 type plan, basically, where JMRL pays 8% of salary into it every year. And if you stay for 5 years, it goes up to 9%. And if you stay for 10 years, it goes to 10%. So that's not an employee match. It's not an employee match. That's totally the organization paying into it. This is the city's plan as well. So they're currently offering both the pension and this.
You have to be there for 5 years to, you know, to participate in that pension.
No, the vesting period is shorter than that. I think it's 3.
3 years. Jared,
Oh,
it's 3.
Yeah.
3
Okay.
years.
Oh, they took pretty soon.
So we did have some issues with with job categories fitting, as I mentioned there, because JMRL currently has, I'll show you our salary scale here.
Any transit people.
No transit people.
On the
But
stage with all the.
This is adapted from the last pay schedule change that the city made. We worked with them and did this at the same time. We moved into bands and stages. We have 3 bands and stages within them. So all of our movement for the last 20+ years, I believe, don't quote me on it, I'll look that up before the budget committee gets together, has been within this. I will definitely make this. So it starts at band 1, stage 1. Ranging from our courier jobs to maintenance jobs, but also this includes branch support and circulation support. So most of the folks that you see working frontline desks at most of our locations are somewhere in this band 1 and stage 1. This is what got raised several years ago with the minimum wage adjustment to a $15 start there. These used to be 2 separate stages. We combined them during that minimum wage adjustment to give more responsibility to the stage 1 folks and also raise their pay. So it used to be that position was called shelver, and all they did was shelve. Now the position is called shelver support, and they're to be called upon to offer circulation support as well. So you can see the range there between $15 an hour and $24 an hour. And at 8 years, the goal would be somebody would be making $19.50.
And they started at 15.
They start at 15.
Mhm.
There's no mechanism though, Alita, there's no mechanism now to get them from that 15 to that 1950. It's all words. It's at 2% a year. It's going to take more than 8 years to get there. So right now we're not pulling people along because we're only offering a cost of living increase every year.
Yeah.
And we are hearing it from staff and from people that we're trying to, you know, they're asking for a lot more salary, to Kathy's point, than we have had in the past. Then we move into stage 3, which is our specialist positions. These are the folks. Generally, the big difference between stage 1 and 2 and stage 3 is at stage 3, you can have some responsibility for a building at times. So you wouldn't be a manager of a building, but you would be the manager's designee if they're not there. So like night shift, you're the one there, someone else who's in charge, you can be this. That and programming. They can do programming. They can be off the desk in the room, running a story time or doing any other sort. Then we get into supervisors. So already how many jobs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And these are all real jobs that we need. These aren't, you know, made up positions or whatnot. We have supervisors in circulation, supervisors in reference. That's the end of band 1. Then we get to
If it's blank, does that mean it's just the same as?
yes, these are all, every job here in stage 3 is at the same level of cost. The next stage is generally known as the professional stage, and we've got some technical support. Our HR, I'm sorry, public communication specialist, internet specialist starts at 1904. Again, could go up to 3046, but we have no way to get from A to B there, or A to C rather. And then there's the librarian category. Most of our professional librarians are in band 2, stage 2. So cataloging children's, reference, young adult, they start at $20 an hour, 2803, could get up to 3205. There's a slight additional category there of supervising librarians that got added after this was originally done. It's like the children's librarian here at this branch is the supervising children's librarian, so she has authority over that scheduling. She does the assessments for the staff there, things like that. So she'll be supervisor. Stage 3 there are managers, so it's branch managers, bookmobile manager, and then stage 4 are some of the regional managers. So the head of human health services, head of children's services, head of circulation services, region 1. And then you get to the last band 3, which is the administrative level, basically. And it's short. It's Donnelly's assistant to the library director, business manager, collections and technology manager, Krista's job, and my job. My job's actually has never been on the pay scale set by the board, but since I've begun, it's just been my starting salary. I take the same raise that should the board give me a raise, I take the raise. So that's where we are currently.
You're gonna stay.
I'm not going anywhere. As long as you fail. So the issues are that we've got these 20+ categories and Gallagher compressed them all into about 5. So it was very hard to parse the data out to say, like, what does this mean? I'll show you those titles in a second, But like somebody they call library manager in their world, we didn't get any definitions or any. We weren't allowed to ask them questions directly because the city treated us like a department as part of this study, which we appreciate this. This is a very expensive study they brought us in for as part of their stewardship of JMRL, so we're glad for it, but we couldn't ask them, what jobs do you mean by this? What jobs do you mean by that? So we're gonna have to go back and do some of that work on our own with city HR. They're doing the same thing in the city. Each department has the information that they got with Gallagher. They have the jobs that they currently have. They've got the market information for who Gallagher talked to, and they have to figure out how to make those things connect because they don't exactly connect right now. We're gonna have to do that same thing. But the city's priorities are gonna be on the city positions first. So they're working on those right now. I saw communication yesterday that said that they hope that by the end of January, they might be done with their own kind of first pass at this and ready to go. Some of them might be done earlier, some departments, they might start seeing raises and things like that. Now, JMRL can't just say, okay, we're gonna give more money to this. We need to go to all 5 jurisdictions and say, hey, will you help us fund this? And our budget cycle is now.
Yeah.
We're gonna give them a budget at the end of Thanksgiving. So we're not gonna have a completed salary study for this year. Our goal would be for next year, and even that might be. So what are we gonna do in the meantime, is the question, right? I made myself copious notes today. So let me show you the jobs that Gallagher says for JMRL. They all start with L, which is nice.
We started in file naming, that's what I've done. Saying that you can't start the file with the name research.
Because everybody is research.
So that makes every file on your shared drive start with R. So you have to drop the word research.
Librarian 1, librarian
So
2.
to manager.
Manager, manager 2, library specialist, library supervisor, support assistant, support associate. So these are the main ones. There are a few scattered throughout, but most of them are under the L's for libraries. So here's the base salary. Let's just look at librarian 1. 45,000 for a professional librarian 1. The combined markets, this is the average of everybody else they talk to, 61,000, 26.7%. Here's the next one, librarian 2, 28.9. Manager, which we're not sure about again, but I think means branch managers, 12%. Library manager 2, it's not clear to me what that is, and they didn't find any market data for it, so it might be large branch manager, or it might be regional manager.
And because we're a different kind of library system.
We have different, every library system in Virginia has different titles and names, it's an ongoing frustration, but
But we're one of the biggest. because
yes,
of-
so we have positions that some other libraries won't have because of our size. Specialists, 28% under. Remember, they said anything under, what was the cutoff? 15 was a dramatic market readjustment. We are out of whack with the market that we're not close, basically. And we knew this going into it, but here's the data right up front. Except library support assistant, 12 points over. Probably that's the what we would call band 1, stage 1. You know, it's probably the positions in there that are shelter support, courier, and maintenance. You know, because we brought that up to 15, and the board made a choice 2 years ago. We're going to, you know, it's going to cause compression, but we're going to make sure everybody gets at least 15, knowing this was coming. So we're good there for now. I mean, this every year gets bigger and bigger. Library support associates. It's unclear to me if this is our band 1, stage 2, or if this is specialist. But at either rate, everything is in the red here for library. You know, not quite everything because of this manager and manager 2, but it's dramatic. And when you look at the rest of the scale for their other jobs from the city, like 20% is about the lowest. Here's 20%. Oh, here's director of library, 17.6% under. Fine, I get paid in goodwill. Here's one of ours, collections and technology manager, and they just couldn't find anybody. That's Kayla's job, so there is no comp. You know, they couldn't find another collections and technology.
I couldn't find any lifeguards either.
But you can see that they were pretty good, and it's very shocking that all the L's together there. That's where we are. So this is the scenario that we're starting with here. We're not gonna have an answer to here's what your pay scale should be for next year. And even if we get that next year, we then need to take it to 5 jurisdictions and say, this is likely. It's probably close to, I don't wanna, this is a guess, so don't quote me on it, but it's probably $1 million or more a year in order to fix this the way it should be fixed so that there's no red on that screen. So we're probably not looking at rolling it out to get everybody where they need to be in year one. It's gonna be a multi-year step to get there. Okay. So history of raises in the last decade, we went through, there's Tony. Basically, it's been 2% annual for JMRL staff, except for that compression adjustment that ended in 2020 and the minimum wage adjustment, which we just finished. We were in line with our jurisdictional partners for the last, since 2009 until about 2018. Most of them were at about 2% a year. Everybody was getting a 2% raise, 2% raise, 2% raise. And it was a cost of living adjustment. It's okay. You know, you need 2% in order to keep up with eggs. And then in 2018, our jurisdictional partners, so Charlottesville, Albemarle, Green, Louisa, and Nelson, started to more aggressively push for their comp because they were having a hard time hiring and retaining folks, and they needed to address that. So their base level raises for just the last 2 years for Green, Louisa, and Nelson have been 5% for their staff. In Charlottesville and Albemarle, the average has been over 7% for their staff, and they really have done some other things as well. It's a mid-year adjustments. Our board was able to do a series of one-time pay adjustments, which was greatly appreciated by staff since the pandemic, basically, but it's not an answer for long-term growth in your adjustments. So we're falling behind.
Nelson did 5%.
They did 5 last year. I believe they did 5 last year and the year before. We'd have to double check on that. I'm pretty sure it was more. But that was the last budget I looked at. Maybe they made a last minute change in the spring. I'm not sure. So here are my short-term recommendations based on talks with city HR. So this is what we need to talk about today. And this is a lot of budget talk too. It's kind of hard to separate out the personnel talk and the budget. So the first recommendation was to split out the cost of living and the raise, basically. So just every year saying we're going to do 2% raise is selling our staff short, because that's really does our cost of living adjustments. You know, it's not keep up with the market. It's not moving them along in their pay scale. It's just a little bit every year. The next is to try to move all staff some sort of stopgap until we have a fully funded new comp plan. So that means asking for bigger increases for our current staff for next year. And then the third is attempt to address long-term employees. So the folks that have been here and have been told at 8 years plus, you should be at midway through your pay scale and not even close to that. I'm looking for a recommendation that we would give this group to the budget committee to do 2 level raises next year. So there would be a cost of living for everybody, and then 1 raise for staff that have been in service to JMRL for up to 7 years, and then a greater raise for staff that have been there for over 8 years. And the numbers that Jerry and I have been working with have been a 2% cost of living increase, and then a 3% raise for short-time staff that have been here under 7 years, and a 5% raise for staff that have been here over 8 years. So
Are there any staff that have been here over 8 years? None of them are where they're supposed to be?
I don't believe so. I'd have to go
Wow.
back through.
In their
That would
current
be,
position?
that the increase would be either 5% or 7%.
So it would be a cost of living and then a step.
Yes, okay. We won't call it a step yet because we don't have those
Yeah,
steps laid
yeah.
out, but it'll be the
But
first
that's
year
kind
where we're gonna change the language, we're gonna have a cost of living and then an increase in top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually it'll be the step. For now, it's just be a raise. So it'll be either 5% if you've been here for 7 years or less, or 7% if you've been here for 8 years.
Well, question for you, what
Yes.
are you gonna call it? Because you don't kind of want somebody to say, oh, I got a stipend.
We would call it a raise.
Okay.
Yeah. And when we talk to our jurisdictional partners, we would call it a compensation increase, you know, talk about how it's 2 different things moving forward.
Guys, the state did that several years running. And it was very well received, both by management and by staff. With the idea being that you're adjusting the scales at the same time you're making sure that everyone is keeping up. So just an anecdote.
Yeah, and our goal, Tony, is catching up, not keeping up.
Right,
We're not-
exactly. Yeah, I understand.
So how many positions do you feel are open?
Yeah, that's an interim posting, Jerry's not, he's native to the. I've been working to fill, we haven't had any positions that we have period not been able to. But it has taken a lot longer, we have overspent in our budget, we have had to make other accommodations, like helping with travel costs and things and moving expenses for people. We have had to look at all of our qualifications for positions very carefully. Because of things that, like take Jerry's position for instance, when we hired him, we were looking for somebody that potentially had a master's in business administration. But when we opened it up after him, we looked for people that had much lesser qualifications that could be turned into. Had some experiences that were relevant. So it's more that type of situation. And we generally, our pools are much smaller than they have been in the past. And whether that's all comp or some of that is just kind of the COVID, not as many applications for jobs. I'm not sure.
So, I know that at UVA, they're very concerned with faculty retention. And the number that got conveyed to me, provost office is it costs them $70,000. So every time you lose somebody, have to pay that amount of money to try.
So that's not salary, it's the cost.
The cost of training them, looking for them.
Maybe getting them to move from one place to another.
Maybe flying, all the things that they have to do to go. And so that was just, it might be a useful exercise to think to yourselves, how much does it cost to really, so if we're not able to move certain staff salaries and we lose them, how much will it cost us to find someone and how long will we have to go without their services?
Yeah, I like that because it's easy to talk about institutional knowledge and loss of that, but it's harder. It's better when you talk about it.
So let's just go to. Because they don't know, maybe they know some of these staff, they don't, but it's like, we're losing a lot, or we're losing a lot of things, we don't pay.
Well, and in some cases, we've had positions like the courier position, we don't get applications, we don't get anybody, and then we have to do the temp service in the meantime, which costs more.
It's very expensive. And we've been cycling through employees.
Can you buy? Because I've heard that too, where they do the temp. So, and then you buy them out, they're like, Fred, we'll hire Fred now, like we've tried it out, he's reliable, whatever.
We did that for one of those positions, right, where the person that just moved into, they applied for the job and we posted it and they took it, but then again, it was. There.
Some positions just have a higher burnout rate too, I think.
Can you copy that on the other sheet that I was on?
Yes, this one. Yeah, how many do we need?
Just for the table. Thank you, Mr. Okay, so can we have a discussion about whether or not this committee likes that approach in general? This has nothing to do with the budget and the funding of it. We still need to take this to Charlottesville, our budget committee, then our board, then Charlottesville, Marbury, and Louisa and Nelson. I think to the point we were just making, they all understand the difficulty in keeping up with comp in the market these days. They all see increased demands for salary from their staff. So it's not going to be any surprise, and that doesn't mean that
They're gonna love it.
yeah, that they're
And Charlottesville is having the problem
yes,
anyway across the board.
yes.
Trying to get staff.
Yeah. Teachers, instructional assistants,
And then,
city hall people, I mean.
and then can you afford to live here?
So they're well aware, and we've had very close conversations with both Charlottesville and Albemarle, our two largest funders, about this because the bulk of the costs there are going to fall on those two. The smaller jurisdictions are facing similar issues and are also going through their own salary studies. But there it becomes a little bit more of a question of like, okay, what's the dollar amount we need? Not do I philosophically agree with this? Can we afford this extra money for this project.
So you're just asking, you're putting on the table right now this sort of stopgap thing, which is to say, we're not catching up, we're not getting to making up the 26% or whatever, but we're at least making an effort, that's it.
Yes.
So that if Alita was working at the library, she would at least get some hope that there could be a change coming. And then she'd say, well,
because basically we're not gonna have a new proposed salary schedule until we talk to. Until we work through the city Chelsea's HR. And that's gonna be the time.
okay.
So I would propose, a million things are on the table. You know, we could say, oh, let's give everybody a 50%, you know. Looking for the most reasonable way to address the fact that we're so far behind the market there, and the fact that we have longtime staff who are, not that it's worse for them than for new staff, but they have fallen farther behind because they started lower.
So they've been here 15 years and someone that's been here 5 years and they're very, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite reasonable. I mean, I think what you're saying is, okay, we're not gonna solve this, but at least this is maybe something uphill that the jurisdictions would swallow because they've recently given out this kind of.
Yeah, they've given larger raises, and part of it is a structural problem too with our timing. You know, we need to get our budget information to them now, right? And they don't do their budget decisions until the spring.
Well, you also, it's like turning up the heat and, putting the frog in the water. We actually need to make a bigger jump next year, but if we make a little bit of a jump, then we won't be such an awful
That
go.
was so far off. Yes.
So then next time.
Yes. So in general, though, if we just did that, we lost time, but when you were.
Oh,
Yeah, it's almost there.
Okay, well, let's talk about, so let's put a pin in that. And I think what I'm looking for is this board doesn't make motions, this committee rather, we would just make a recommendation. You would recommend to staff that we include certain things in the budget that we put together for the budget committee. Alita happens to be the chair of the budget committee too. So you'll have heard, sign here. You will have heard this, and we'll make a similar talk to the budget committee, and then the full board will hear some things similar.
She said it.
she could have passed it.
But let's look at the personnel requests. So basically, I thank you, Christopher, for copying this. I'm sorry, I didn't have to bring them up.
Page 2.
Yeah. So the board's priority was addressing lack of movement on JMRL salary scale from the last meeting. That was the priority that was discussed, the top priority. So that's kind of its own thing. That's what we're just been talking about. Here are the positions that were requested, the changes to positions that were requested from JMRL's managers. Substitute hour increase in Louisa. This is a fairly minimal cost that would only come from Louisa County. It would be 100 hours salary for these positions, just to give some flexibility there. And they lost some hours there when we did a salary adjustment a few years ago. Greene County is looking for 8 more hours per week to a children's specialist position and potentially upgrade that to a professional librarian position. So that's a twofold request. It's a 32-hour position. They had a person there for 10 years who moved away last year. They wanted the 32 hours. We had to push for 40. That pushed for their life. It worked out great. When it was time to hire, they had a very difficult time preparing for this because it's not 32 hours is a hard job. It's not a part-time job in the sense that you can work 40 hours somewhere else and then work 15 or 20, but it's not a full-time job, so you don't get the benefits, right? Full benefits back. So they're looking to increase that. I'm fairly supportive of both of those two requests because for Louisa, it's up to them.
Yeah,
it's up to them basically. And in Greene, in Louisa, that's one thing. It's not a deal breaker there, but it would be a big help to their staff. In Greene, they went through it this summer. They had 2 positions leave, and we pulled on people from all over the region to help fill, to keep the library open some days in Greene County, because they were so short staffed. So this hopefully would help to retain somebody there. Also, Greene County's regional costs have been relatively static the last few years. They have not been asked for an increase in a while. So I met with their new county administrator. and talked about what the needs are, and this is one of the things.
What is the difference between the specialist and professional? That,
It's a higher paid position, and the person has to have a master's in library science.
This class, the person that they hired.
The person is currently, there is a person currently in the position that has a master's in library science. But our staff compensation committee would have to work.
Right.
And they're not to,
Yeah,
you know. This is a budgetary thing,
Yes.
really, at this point. It would not be until next year. So we wouldn't make that request based on current staffing, it would be based on budget needs. But basically, another professional in the building, currently the branch manager is the only professional member in the building. So it would be somebody to help run the branch as well. Request from Northside, I'm pretty sure each one of these was a request last year as well, Meredith, to your point about what Northside was looking for last year. The 20-hour circulation support positions, that'll be somebody to work the front desk there. 20-hour children's specialist, that's a position in the children's room there. Adding hours to a reference librarian position, it's currently a 20-hour position. It's gotten it off from the manager today saying they actually don't want 10 hours, they want 6 hours. It's a slight change there. And then a request for so the Northside campus would be effectively 80% Albemarle, 20% Charlotte. That's about the breakdown of the circulation there, how they pay. These are budget committee issues, but just laying out. The IT digital branch is a regional cost, so every one of the 5 jurisdictions would have to pay into that. And the request there is for a web content specialist, somebody that would kind of work between our PR person and our digital branch manager to get content up online. Okay, so those are to support existing services, so nothing new coming from that. The next 2 categories here are adding new services. You can see a whole list of things, which includes 3 full-time positions and 3 part-time positions to add new services, which is Northside Sunday hours. We included this because we got a request from a member of the Albemarle Board of Supervisors last year for Sunday hours, and we developed a plan. So I asked the manager to include this year. There's a good chance that they'll come back and ask for it. I have a concern here, adding 6 new positions that then are also 25% below the market value means that over time we need to get all of those up as well. So the true cost of that is much greater. This is already a tremendous cost, but it will be much greater. And the last one is to add new services for the bookmobile. So this year is our first year running in Nelson and Louisa. That leaves Greene County as being the only jurisdiction that doesn't get service. So it'd be making the 2 part-time jobs, full-time jobs, but it likely also would require a second vehicle because they don't have enough time in their days, basically, with just 1 vehicle to provide service to. So it would be greater service, 2 bookmobiles, greater service in Greene, Louisa, and Nelson, plus some additional in Charlottesville, Albemarle, but it needs to be bookmobile, which probably is not in the plans for next year. We just got Nelson's outreach van, which was paid for by fundraising for Nelson, just sitting in the city yard. The bookmobile is a couple years. Is before your time on the board.
Yeah, maybe we just ask for it, maybe.
We need a truck, a delivery truck. In terms of the capital needs, that's going to be the bigger one for next year. So in general, my recommendation is to keep Charlottesville and Albemarle costs down here, as they're going to take the brunt of that salary load. We don't have data yet on what's going to change in our medical requests for next year or our retirement costs for next year. They're probably not going to be. So there's going to be increases, just personnel increases across the board without any salary changes. You know, medical is going to cost more, retirement is going to cost more. So just looking at the scenario that we laid out, which was that 5% increase and a 7% increase, and finishing out, remember last year was the last year that the board gave a credit to each jurisdiction, took some money out of the board's general fund to pay for the minimum wage adjustment. That's gone now. So they need to make that up. We're looking at over 100K for Charlottesville and over 250K for Albemarle in order to do those salaries, and that doesn't include other things. So I'm hesitant to make requests for new positions in those 2 areas because of the costs for this year and the next few years. But we have to make a decision here, and budget committee ultimately can decide about where that leaves, really where that leaves more stuff.
Well, is it possible just not all of those positions may be part of, some of those positions?
I think that we can certainly, yes, that's on the table.
Because the Sunday, it could be a short, people to church and maybe have lunch after church or something like that. And so maybe from.
It would be 1 to 5, I'm sure, if there were Sunday hours. That's what they were. They did have Sunday hours at one point, and then they went back, so it'd be 1 to 5, I'm sure.
My thinking, Alita, is that the Sunday hours really aren't on the table unless the city and the county come to us and say, yes, we're gonna fund those. We're gonna give you hundreds of thousands of dollars to make that happen because of community demand. Then we would do that, and we're getting results from our community engagement survey, and there are questions about Sunday hours.
And also we were asking for Zay, because Central Library is already open on Sunday. The distance between Central and North Side is not nearly as much as, Rosette, but again, it's a
We did.
community.
I didn't-
We didn't even, right. But it would be probably similar at least, because
At least,
There's
yeah. we have a lot
smaller
of
staff to start with.
and they're running out of room for places to put staff too. But so's North Side.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of desk space left, so, I think my recommendation, what I think that we should do as a library system is to move with the 5% increase and 7% increase based on the years of service that we talked about.
Is it 3 and 5? No.
It's 3 and 5, but then also 2% COLA.
That's fine.
This is gonna get confusing, so this is the Kathy's point.
This is why I'm
what word to use. And to me, that was the board's top priority, pretty clearly laid out last month. It's gonna be for compensation for current staff. And then these Louisa and Green, I think that's kind of a little bit, the way I described it last year, it's a la carte service for them, they can do that or not. And then the question really is whether or not to include a budget with these north side positions and which ones. I would think that we would leave off the Sunday hours and the mobile service for next year. So really, we're just talking about the staff and that IT position, whether or not to recommend those to the budget.
Well, I do think we should be supporting our 2 busiest branches.
North side is by far the busiest branch.
The digital branch is getting busier.
Yeah.
I'm a little unclear about what the digital does and how that will help.
It's a lot of data entry.
So
Every time we want a program up on the website, every time there's a new art exhibit, every time there's a new whatever. Right now, it's more data entry than it is like Sarah and Kayla have kind of the bigger like web development stuff. And
So this is web support, not the digital branch.
well, the digital branch is the website. So. Either way, yeah.
So let's take those one at a time. Are we okay with making a recommendation to the budget committee and the full board for that raise structure, that COLA area structure, that 2-step? Any more discussion on that?
No, just watch the word.
Watch the wording, think carefully about how it's described. Yes, that's good advice. Okay. Are we okay with giving the budget committee a budget that includes the Louisa and Green request there for the substitute hours and the more hours per week for the children's specialist position and the upgrade there?
I think so.
Because the Louisa agree that's on them.
Right. They get to pay for it. They would pay for it, they can have it.
Well, we would want to value there, we would need to have a discussion with them about like how that helps service there. So it's not like some years, like for the bookmobile last year, is you can either have this bookmobile service or not. That was really hard. Here it's like, we need some support for the current service, and Green especially, and Green will be easy to show because we can show how many times we had to send somebody from Central out there this summer to try and help keep the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also just how hard it is to hire and keep someone, part-time paraprofessional position versus a professional position. And also, I think Green's getting to the point that they need that second, the only branches that don't have these 2 professional positions. Right,
Scottsville.
right. So Gordon has it now, Jose has it at least 2, and some have more.
Yeah, Crozet only has, the branch manager is professional,
Yes.
Crozet has 1 additional professional position, Gordon now has 2. Since that change got made, a couple years ago.
Yeah, so anyway, I think it would be good for green.
Northside has 1 in charge of each service desk and then also the reference staff, so it's. All right, well, let's skip over the hard part here and say, are we okay with not adding the Sunday hours and the bookmobile hours unless we have a conversation with those jurisdictions saying, this is a community need, we need to pay what it takes to make this happen.
And I think also waiting to see what we won't know the survey data until,
Well,
that's the next 5-year plan, so the next 5-year plan might include Sunday hours, but not the current.
I mean, would Sunday hours be popular? I'm sure they would be
Yes.
incredibly popular.
Yes.
I'm sure they would be very well used. I mean, I think that Central Library does a very interesting job of saying during the school year, you have Sunday hours.
People ask for Sunday year round, and I think if we were open Sunday year round,
I think that's likely the same
Yeah.
model that any other branch would use, when more sites to be open on Sundays.
it was the same schedule.
Same schedules.
And that.
But I feel that's very reasonable. It's really to us, I think, to us to say this is supporting our schools. So we are imagining that kids are needing to do projects, and they need to check things out, they need to stuff. I mean.
So I think what I'm proposing is that we don't have the budget committee include those hours. Am I hearing something different from you, Meredith?
No, but I think what is great when we get these, now this is my second year. When we get these requests, when they come back again, it feels like it's a bit more urgent. The second time, like, okay, they asked, and then they ask again, and now we need to start addressing.
Okay, so then now we're talking about the bottom 4 of the second category there, which is 20-hour circulation support position for Northside, 20-hour children's specialist position, 10 hours per week, which likely would be less for the reference librarian position. It's basically all 3 of the service desks minus the young adult desk. They're asking for more support, so that circulation desk, the children's desk, and that children's one would have flexibility to work. Young adult.
And those are those the $15 a week?
No, these one is support, one is specialist. So the support one begins in the $15 range, the specialist one begins at the next
tier.
Yeah, the next tier up, so it's more expensive. So that's a good question. The children's specialist position is more expensive than the circuit.
And the reference is more than that.
And the reference one is a professional one, but it's less hours.
And that's somebody that we already have, we're adding more hours.
Yeah, that would be good. That's an easier sell too, because sometimes when, again, this is budget committee territory, but sometimes when you're talking to a jurisdiction and you're asking for new positions, they're not looking at what the needs of the library are. They're comparing the request for a new position to the fire department's request for a new position, and to their IT team's request for a new position. And to they're looking at the people within their organization that they're saying no to, and saying yes to a new position here causes friction. So sometimes the dollar amount is not the issue, just it's a new position when they have other needs for new positions.
Because they can say no to positions and they can.
Yes. So sometimes it's easier to request the funding to turn a part-time job into a full-time job and get coverage that way than to create a whole new thing to manufacture new positions. Any strong thoughts about that? Our options are to either include it in the budget and hand that over to the budget committee and say, here, we've approved these, we think this is a good idea, include it in your budget, and then they might have to make a cut there. Or to say, not this year, and present them one without those positions.
One time we prioritize.
You can do that.
That would probably be a good idea, because then it kind of gives everybody attention, but then the whole body kind of comes together and decide, the whole group.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Could we do that and not include the Sunday hours and the extra bookmobile
Yeah, we could put that down as a,
to the future, basically? Okay, so then we're really talking about that to support existing services.
Mhm.
All right, who's gonna top priority? I do.
And what's your-
Cover is-
Sounded like you were voting for the add 10 hours before any of you.
Well, just look at that whole list, it'll be the Green County.
Mhm.
Oh, gotcha.
Well, we already had.
So we're just talking about prioritizing those bottom four, is that what
Yeah.
you're?
Yeah,
Then, ours has been new, you were saying,
but,
it's easier to add some.
Potentially.
but Green County needs it. They kind of need it. It's almost like you.
I mean, we could just say we're recommending that one
Okay.
and not prioritize it, just say we're recommending that. And Louise-
Because it's up to their.
And then we're gonna prioritize the next four and leave it to the budget, leave it to Alita to decide later what the budget can say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She takes pride. So I guess what I would say that it sounds like you're saying is let's prioritize the adding hours to the reference library position. And we're pretty sure that we can.
I think that would be the easiest sell, because we would need to describe it to Charles and Allow as a new thing, it would just be like, we'll use $1 for more hours, but what would give the most value here is a tough question. Depends on who you ask, right? If you ask Liz and you ask Natasha, they're going to be two
Yeah.
different answers, because they both have such needs in the children's room and at the front desk.
But doesn't reference if needed help at the children's desk?
Yes, we do.
What about the surf desk?
When absolutely needed, yes.
Yeah, so. More cross-training availability of the reference position than the other two, in terms of filling in when someone's out.
Last year, the board approved a children's substitute position,
They got that.
which they got. So now they are in the process of trying to hire somebody, but it would be somebody who's available to plug in those holes. So it wouldn't be somebody you could schedule for every Wednesday night from 6 to 9. That would be like, hey, Mary's on vacation, somebody or somebody's sick or something like that. So the children's room got something last year, but it's not enough. They are covering 2 desks too. There's a children's desk, and then right behind it is the young adult desk, and you have to be at both of those. But Chris also might have to cover 3 of those desks, working out of the reference desk there.
Usually you have at least 2 people in between the 2, but sometimes you're down to just 2 for all 3 desks.
Yes. And I can provide you all the documentation that the manager sent, but it's all very convincing. They all need more help, and this is not, to Mary's point, it's not the first time we're going to ask for it.
Yeah. I forgot that we did get frozen up with the substitute. I thought we could.
Yeah, so with that in mind, I don't think circulation got anything last year, I mean, it might just be. I'll be honest, I have a hard time seeing any of these making it out of the budget process.
Any new position.
Yes, so it's good to show our support for it, and for the board to know that there's support for it, and to really advocate for these.
Put the
moving
costs
forward.
together.
And when you start adding up all the costs that we're looking at next year, it's gonna be a hard sell.
Mhm.
What about this, the bookmobile, you say that Green is the only county that's not has the bookmobile. So but then if we did say, well, let's increase the number of hours, that wouldn't help because we need another vehicle.
It's hours a day, basically, so you can't be at 2 places at once, or you can if you have 2 vehicles.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think that's on the table for now. And also structurally right now, that's paid for. The regional agreement says that outreach and bookmobile services is kind of a contract basis with each jurisdiction, so we're charging like for the services in Nelson, Sharon, for the service in Louisa. We're basically charging them the hourly rate of these employees, plus some money for gas and wear and tear on the vehicles. I think I'd be more interested in the future of having it broken up as a regional cost, like technical services is, so that everybody's getting it. And it's broken out by your circulation numbers, and the numbers wouldn't be that far off, but that requires a rewrite of the regional agreement, because right now it says specifically it's not contract. So at that point, I think that rather than see it as an add-on service, I think COVID taught us that, being where people are is an incredibly important library service, and rather than seeing it as, it's nice to have, but if you don't, you're still getting good library service. I'd like to see it worked into the fold. It's more, here's a to be expected service.
Are we allowed to buy with friends?
Yes. I believe the last one was bought.
Or would they want like an outside reach services vehicle?
Potentially smaller version of it. I think that we would be looking for something that we could get on, because we don't want to shortchange people agreeing to say, oh, hey. And you don't get quite the same level of service, so I think we would want something in between.
So that would be, that could be a.
We have a bookmobile now, we need to start it.
A request to the friends, hi guys, we'd like to read.
I think that would be.
Or like a grant, special like
Mhm.
designation, like, you know, St. Matthew's Band decides to give us $100,000 for a bookmobile for Green County, that'd be great.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it would
I
have
mean,
to be.
I would say that should be on your back pocket, that's the things to ask you, if someone wants to give you.
To me, the Sunday hours and those are in the same boat, where it's like, these are very expensive new services. That we would love to be able to
Sustain.
offer, but in order to sustain them, it's a key word. Thank you. We need support, not just this year, but.
Because you don't give something and then take it away.
Okay, so let's,
It has been done. It has been done. When Jen and Lisa, it's been done at North.
so let's talk about these four positions here. We're basically gonna make a recommendation to the budget committee where we will put in all these things that we discussed. And then say, like, here's the value of each of these, and here's what it would cost if you were to add these on there. My inclination coming into this meeting was to say, no new Charlottesville Albemarle positions, no new positions. So only to support reasons, not to ask for these things this year, because to me, the raise is more. That's important, right? I think if you ask most staff.
We'd rather
Would you- would you rather-
16 people, I'd be able to keep them, right?
Get more help so that it's less stressful. I think we know what most people.
I like that better. That we're looking towards the future. And then once we settle the pay increases, then
Yeah, then
we can add extra. The
Exactly.
morale, I think, would be
Yes.
pretty good.
Yeah.
It would be really sad if you couldn't give them any.
Well, and the time that we spend trying to hire people, like we spin our wheels sometimes through a couple rounds because either we can't get anybody to come in to interview to start with.
Mhm.
You know, they apply and then when we say, here's the job, here's the pay, they say no thanks.
Mhm.
Or we get somebody, really like them. And then they ask for more money and then we have to say no, and they have to start all over again. So that's time and money too that we're spending.
Yeah, that was your point about the program that UVA was putting on our
Yeah,
staff.
I mean. I know why you guys are doing it, but it does hurt my heart to see that we're offering. Jobs, I mean, I just feel like, who's gonna do that, maybe like a mom with small kids.
Some people's lives.
But it is, you know, yeah, sometimes.
I did the 20 hour position for a while, my kids were little.
Yeah,
I mean, it's.
just in terms of equity issues, we're not offering them any benefits, we're.
They do
They
get
get
benefits.
benefits.
20 hours, you get.
They get leave
Okay.
benefits, yeah,
That's great, there's a cutoff.
yeah,
Okay, I found a little bit of.
yeah, and they get leave benefits, even 10 or 15 hour people, if they're regular people, there's some leave and holiday benefits.
Cause I don't like the giving someone.
I think you raise a good issue though, which is one of the reasons why this class and comp, this whole work is so important, is because JMRL has for decades relied on a fucking manager said, yeah, we just need somebody who's retired, we need somebody who used to be a teacher that has time, we need this, and to provide the best library service to the people in the area. We shouldn't be waiting for somebody whose life circumstance says, like, yeah, I can work like every Sunday for 4 hours. We need to find the best and most qualified people. In order to do that, we need to provide the best range of compensation. So I hear your point there.
Yeah, but I also feel like, it is gonna be everyone's hope to have a raise, but we don't wanna burn people out with situations. They're like, there's gonna substitute, I can use the bathroom. Can't, I have to cover 3 desks, you know, we don't wanna burn. out. So, David, you need to go for children's desk.
Are you on the budget committee too?
Huh?
Are you on the budget committee?
No, don't bother. It just deleted.
No, the Charlottesville round is,
No, but it's.
Yeah.
David knows better than to set me on.
I mean, the budget committee is,
Funny.
the budget committee is almost the whole board, except for you.
Because you have to have representative.
Three Louisa and Nelson to be there, so besides you two,
So what I will.
And Don. And Peter.
well, we can certainly then, you know, we'll be wishy-washy between these two options. The options are either to present, say, yes, we want to include these here. I mean, if this personnel committee feels that those positions are needed, then it's the job of this personnel committee to say to the budget committee, yes, we do this. And it's the budget committee's job to say, no, we can't. So if that's the case, then I like Kathy's initial, let's prioritize. But now we need to make a decision basically between that CERT job and that children's job. Which one is the top priority? That is very hard.
Yeah.
If one pays less, it's the.
The cheaper one is the circulation support position. That's also the department that did not get anything
Less.
administrative by us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the busiest single circulation desk at JMRL.
I say is that. Because we gave them children's.
We gave them substitute, which is
Substitute.
not, it's a stopgap measure at best.
Yeah.
They also definitely need this other thing.
Of course they do. That's why they're on this list.
So they will be second, then so we'll say CERT, then children's. And then the reference hours.
But the reference are the first, because it's.
I'm talking about need, not
Oh,
us.
no, I thought you were gonna think that we could probably get it through, but,
Actually, but that's more of a budget committee.
okay, it's the public thing.
And we're gonna add that web content specialist to the list of priorities, or leave it off. Any strong feelings? We can put it at the bottom there and add the costs.
See what it
See
costs.
what it costs, yeah.
I mean, we have a shiny new website, it would be nice to make sure that it is up to.
I have, and everybody understands, you know, what my priorities have been, and they are gonna be for the next few years on this compensation. And it's gonna take a long time, so that also means that the light at the end of the tunnel for adding these new jobs is probably not just 1 year. It's probably a few years, so we might be in this room having the same conversation next year about these same positions.
They pull out my heartstrings.
Well, yeah, if it's the third time's the charm.
And I'm like. You want your for Christmas, why?
So I am going to direct our finance manager to put together a budget that includes the either 5% increase or 7% increase for staff. Includes the 100%, sorry, 100 substitute hours from Louisa and the 8 more hours position upgraded to the screen position. And then I'll say, and give us on the side what the costs are for these 4 positions and let the budget committee then decide whether it's to include the final budget.
Sounds good.
And everything else we'll put on
And then I think that then the north side Sunday hours needs to be put into your conversations with the city
Yeah,
and.
they,
with
they,
the
yeah,
county.
I think they, it's hard.
The next 5 year. Right, and doing a presentation, as well, we've done a survey and here this up, we've seen this upcoming requests, we'd like to think about this is.
Well, and you have these beautiful buildings that aren't being fully utilized.
You're already paid for it. Does it need this much to open it on Sunday?
Yeah, I think, I see. Yes, especially if you're doing 4 hours.
Yeah, they've got-
You've
they've got-
got to have.
5 service desks. We got a drive up, circulation desk, reference desk, kids, children's desk, and the adult desk. So even Lindsay and I talked about, we wouldn't want to not offer full services, right? So probably we wouldn't do a lot of programming on Sundays to
But
begin
the
with,
meeting rooms alone.
but the meeting rooms would be tremendously popular. But we wouldn't want to say no drive up service.
Yeah.
So,
And you have to add that many hours for everybody to get in, and
Yeah, because the people, it wouldn't necessarily be the only people who work on Sunday.
It rotates around, yeah.
Would need time off during the week. Because they're working on Sunday.
Right.
And time off during.
So you need, somebody to cover. So these positions, they're not just working.
No,
Correct.
Yeah.
We have had that before. I haven't, when I was a circulation.
Nobody wants to work.
I had to submit to things very difficult.
Yeah.
And I was just one.
So yeah, like even here, you might work one Sunday a month, but then that means you're off during the week, so then someone has to cover your work in the week shift, so that's, it's just. Saturdays and Sundays both, managers hate it, but the public, that's what we're, that's what they want.
And Krista, you and Go said that these Sundays have been busy so far this fall here.
Oh, yeah.
The program yesterday is very well.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you, more and more people don't have home printers. And like you were saying, you need to print something. I mean, people are doing it off their phones, off their laptops. Nobody keeps a printer at home anymore because it's a pain. So they all come into the library to print. Do you find the same thing, Chris?
Yes, it is exactly the same on both sides. Printing services have just exploded in the past 2 years.
You need to print a boarding pass, you need to print, your kid's paper, you need to print whatever. You get a lot out of that.
Okay, I think we're done then. Kathy, yell us out and then we'll talk about what you tell if we go.
I can't, because you're gonna add the money.
Anything else? We covered everything, I think. It was
Yeah.
a good discussion. Okay, all right. Meeting adjourned.
We're talking about completing.
So I'll see
Parking
this
downtown.
list that should be around starting at 1. If we